We are live from the Territorial Defense Forces Media Studios, and this is Ukraine Inside. I'm Sergeant Sarah Ashton Cirillo of the Territorial Defense Forces. Next to me, this is week number 3, is Oleksandr Musienko, a foreign policy and military expert who is also the founder and director of the Ukrainian NGO, the Center for Military and Legal Studies. Oleksandr, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We've had some interesting discussions over the course of the last few weeks. Today's going to cover several potentially controversial topics, including statements in the Western press and from Western-based think tanks over the success or their allegations of lack of success relating to our counteroffensive against the Russian invaders. But first, can you give us a recap of what's happened over the last week?
Yeah, I can tell you that, as you know, when we captured and when we freed Staromayorsky, our forces are right now there, and Russian forces trying to provide
I'm going to interject for the audience. You knew that Staromayorsky had been liberated prior to the official announcement, and you were hinting at that last week. Probably an hour after you left the studio, we were able to make the official announcement. So you clearly have interesting sources. So I just wanted to remind the audience of that. So,
I knew about this, yes. But of course, we need to first we need to have and listen official announcements, and then after we can speak about this. Yes. So I knew about this. Yes, and I told also that we have a good perspective there. Yes, on this direction, on Berdyansk direction. And
I just updated moments ago from Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maller that we are currently moving forward in the directions of Melitopol and Berdyansk.
Yeah, and Berdyansk, and that's very important. And right now, what we can see on the front line, on the southern front line, Melitopol and Berdyansk directions, that our forces continue offensive operations, our counteroffensive operations. First of all, we are trying to demining territories. That's the problem. And the second, we are trying to use artillery shelling on the positions of Russian forces and trying to destroy defense lines of Russian forces. And then we are prepare, positions for our offensive operations with our ground forces.
I want to point out something you just mentioned, so the audience can understand just how much artillery we're using in the south. In Tavria direction, where the units have had tremendous success, they are firing off over 1,300 to 1,400 artillery shells a day to break through the Russian defense lines. So when Oleksandr was mentioning that artillery is being used, it's being used in massive consumptions and massive amounts.
Yeah, and that's why I can explain why we are using. Do you remember I spoke about this on our last meeting when we had our podcast previous, and I told that that's very important because look, we can use our ground forces when we destroy defense lines, defense Russians lines. That's very important because we will have not so much risks for our ground forces on the ground when we destroy these lines and when we continue to demine the territory. That's very important. And then our forces can move forward. That's very important, and we need to understand this when we are speaking about artillery, especially right now. Our forces using them and using with I think very efficient, they are using for destroying defensive lines. When we are destroying, we can move forward. Because if we will go forward right now without artillery support, it will mean that we will have a higher risks for our ground forces.
And we know that our ground command from Land Force, the planners and strategists in the General Staff, and our civilian leadership led by the Ministry of Defense all place the value of Ukrainian lives and the troops' lives at a much higher level than the Russians treat their own troops. And what you're stating just proves that folks want us to go faster, but they don't really understand the human toll if we did move faster.
Yeah, that's important. And we have a choice first. first point of view. Right now, we will use artillery. We will continue use artillery. We will destroy Russian defense line, and then we will use our forces. They will move with the tanks, with vehicles, with our ground forces, and so on. Our paratroopers. And the second point. Just
one moment.
Yeah.
Our paratroopers. We have airborne in Ukraine.
Yeah, we have airborne.
A couple of days ago, the Russians celebrated their paratrooper day, and we celebrated.
I saw this. I know what you mean.
Yes,
Yeah.
we celebrated by showing what happens to the Russians who choose to engage in airborne operations, and it's just not good for them. So I just had to point that out, that they had a very unhappy Russian paratrooper day on August 1st. So.
Yeah. This was great. I saw
Thank
this.
you, yes.
Yeah. So, and then our forces can move further, and the risks not so huge, because if we will move forward now, mines, Russian artillery, so that's why we are continuing counter-battery artillery shelling, yes. And so I think that we will have risks, we will lose a lot of people. Reserves, we need to, we need to use our reserves. That I often read about our reserves in different Western media. That's okay. They know about our reserves, okay. But how we need to use them? I think that we will use them in that moment. It will be the smart decision how to use them, and when this moment will come. Until this moment didn't come, I think that we need to use our artillery. We will continue to destroy defense line.
Why
and
are
then
we going
will move forward.
and I'm speaking over you and I apologize, but again, why, when we can weaken the Russians through artillery, through airstrikes, through special operations, are we risking our reserves?
Yeah.
We've been at full-scale war for more than 17 months now, 525 days, I believe. Ultimately, we still haven't had a general mobilization here. We still have reserves left preparing all day, every day, to carry out full assaults, and yet President Zelensky and our leadership has not had to declare a full mobilization yet. And this leads into a question. You mentioned Western media.
Yeah.
I'm reading right now something from Viktor Kyiv from the Center for Defense Strategies, which is a group that former Deputy Defense Minister Alina Frolova is part of. They put out an amazing newsletter every day, probably some of the same sources you have, because it's pretty interesting. I don't know who's talking to all you guys, but I don't know about how you civilians have all this information. Needless to say,
Some people say.
Needless to say, I'm looking at this article from Victor. It was written 3 days ago. The English translation is, poor tactics and lack of coordination. What have the foreign analysts seen in the southern direction? And Victor goes on to quote analyst from the Research Institute for International Strategic Studies, somebody from the Carnegie Endowment, very popular Twitter analyst and senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Studies Institute, Rob Lee, and Roshan Consulting, on trips they made to the Southern Front. They have come back with criticisms that many Ukrainians, including Victor from the Center for Defense Strategies, don't agree with. You looked at this article. Can you break it down for us where the non-Ukrainian analysts are simply getting it wrong, along with where the Western media and their stories, such as a New York Times story that came out recently, is also getting it wrong? They are not understanding what our command is choosing to do in order to successfully carry out the counteroffensive that's leading to territorial gains and liberation of Ukraine.
I told about this, and you know that I told that when you're trying to provide some analysis about something, you need to provide with the correct, clear information, with the sources of this information. What I mean, for example, if we have on this left wing, we have NATO doctrine, and we have NATO doctrine how to provide battles, offensive, counteroffensive operation, defense operation, and so on. We will read this. For example, United States. We will read and we will fight them there. We will find Ireland battle. What does it mean? Ireland battle previously was active defense, and now Ireland battle doctrine. What does it mean? It means that you need to use all your power for the fire on your enemy, and then you just need moving forward on the flanks.
You mean combined arms
yeah,
fire,
combined,
air and
combined,
land.
yes, air, land, yes. Air, land. That's
yes.
very important. Why? I can explain. Because look on the example of United States Army operations. I can applaud them. That's brilliant, perfect. And I think that if we will have here air jets, military planes, if we will have Navy, yes, if we will have opportunity to have such a missile like Tomahawk, and also we will have helicopters like Apache and so on. And if we will have all of this, we can use this book and we will put here and just look how we can fix it. Okay, Ukrainians have planes, they have helicopters, they have Tomahawks, they have Navy. So why they are so slow? What's the problem? How we can fix it? Okay, I can agree with this. But when we have here the situation that we do not have still F-16, we do not have still ATACMS, that's only the facts, nothing more.
I want the audience to listen to this. We're not engaging in speculation. We still don't have F-16s. We still don't have ATACMS, let alone F-35s and Tomahawks and Apache helicopters. We don't even have the basic air defense systems and offensive air capability that has been talked about for 17 months.
So, and we do not have this. So how we can think and we can talk about Ukrainian counteroffensive with the NATO or American standards with this book without these weapons? And that's why we are trying to provide our operations, our counteroffensive with these weapons that we have right now. And we have artillery. When we are talking about fire on your enemy, you can use the planes, you can use jets, you can use Navy, you can use long-range missiles, and so on. But if you don't have this, you will use what? Artillery, of course, and you will use MLRS, you will use all of this, and then you will use tanks and so on. And we are doing like this. And also we have the problems with the minefields, and that's also because I read about offensive operations of United States Army in Iraq. Great, that's wonderful. Yes, and I think that the American Army has I don't know the better experience in the world right now. But
I just want to say, I think it's fair to say that the United States Army is not only the most powerful army in the world and the best equipped army in the world, but they have the best soldiers and best, I don't want to say command because command is based off of different sets of status, but the best soldiers when it comes to training, the best equipment. So again, you're taking a doctrine that if the United States is here, and we have to acknowledge the United States Army is here, and then you have just underneath it some of the other NATO armies that have experience in Afghanistan, Iraq, and peacekeeping missions. Ukraine had peacekeeping experience, but we simply don't have the training on these modern weapons, and we haven't been given the opportunity to even receive these modern weapons to carry them out in the
By the way, Ukraine was a part of 26 peacekeeping operations around the world.
So Ukrainians have been spilling blood for the world since 1991, 26 times, more than 24 deployments as peacekeepers. So when people question why are we doing something for Ukraine, I think you need to just look into the history books and see what Ukraine has already provided the world.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, we provided this. And so what I want to say about this, that if we will compare these doctrines, we will have misunderstandings. Because look, for my foreign partners, for all analysts, okay, they are very professional, skills people, they know a lot, they have a good experience. But when you are compare NATO doctrine and USA doctrine, United States Army doctrine for our nowadays conditions, and you will say, just look, you are making mistake because you don't move so faster and so on. We cannot move more faster because we need to protect people, because we need to be more smart than our enemy, and we need to be more mobile, we need to have more efficiency. So that's the point.
Speaking of efficiency, would it be beneficial? Everyone's talking about the glamour weapons, and we need those. I don't even want to say an ATACMS or an F-16 is a glamour weapon, because in reality, this is already old technology. However, instead of just discussing these more known and desirable weapon systems, how important would it be if we just had more of the basics, such as demining equipment? How important would it be if we just had more of the basics, such as anti-tank missiles?
Yeah.
Would that, if our allies stepped up and truly provided us with mass quantity of these, how would that change the perspective of the Western media, the Western analysts? How quickly would we be able to move forward then?
I think that we will be quickly, definitely. And I just imagine if I can say like this. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. If we had F-16 right now, Apache, for example, if we had ATACMS and a lot of artillery, I think that till the end of the summer, we were on the Azov coast.
Do you hear this?
Near administrative borderline with the Crimea.
Here, we're a month and a half. If we had everything we needed, I have Oleksandr Musienko, a man who appears on the National Television Marathon, the founder of the Center for Military and Legal Studies, saying what the world knows, but won't accept. If we had the weapons we needed, we would be at the Azov Sea preparing to go into Crimea in just 45 days.
During this summer days, during this summer campaign, during 3 months.
So I'm getting very angry because we know this to be true, and yet Western analysts and the Western journalists want to pile on and giving us reasons why we're not doing something when we're shedding blood in order to liberate Europe and the world from this scourge of Russia.
Yeah,
it's frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point of view, because if you will compare this, and you cannot compare these examples and this doctrine for our conditions, not because we don't want to have these conditions, these NATO conditions or American conditions. We are thank and we appreciate for our partners for what are they doing for us, and for military exercise, for equipment, ammunitions and weapons. But look, if you are talking in these categories, if you are talking about in NATO standards, so give us all what need army of NATO for the campaign like this, for counteroffensive campaign like this, and then you can examine us. I'm sorry. Then you will say, okay, here you is okay, here you is great, here was a mistake, how we can fix it, and so on and so on.
I'm glad you've clarified this, because ultimately it seems that in the popular mass media, it seems as though when it comes to folks who are sitting in NATO countries, they're able to put out their opinions without always offering the full facts of a situation. And here on Ukrainian side, Oleksandr, you always bring facts. And the facts are, we can't make comparisons of what should be done or what could be done when they literally can't be done without the weapon systems that our NATO partners have in place for their own armies.
Yes, Yes, exactly, and that's very important to understand. And when I saw a lot of articles, a lot of papers in Western media, okay, I read this all, reading this all, I understand this. But how we can fix it? And you know, I read about this probably 80%. They just writing like, okay, Ukraine has problems, this, and that's all.
No one offers a solution.
Yes, and only 20%, they're writing, probably we need to do this, probably we need to supply more weapons, probably we need to help Ukraine with these weapons, probably we need to be more faster with F-16 ATACMS, and so on and so on. And that will fix this, and that will, and then we could provide our counteroffensive faster. And that will be conclusions, it will be offers, yes. So when you are criticized, you need to have an offers, how to fix it, how it, okay, you can say, Ukrainians, they are fighting like this, or they do not have a lot, they can say that we do not have experience. We have.
Sure.
Yes, we have.
Not just 17 months of full-scale war, not just 9.5 years of what had been an anti-terrorist operation and eventually became this full-scale war, but 26 different peacekeeping missions, as well as integrated training with NATO,
yes,
going back more than 5 years now.
Yeah.
And it's not a question of Ukrainian troops. Ukrainian troops have heart, have soul, have skill. Ukrainian commanders understand the Russian enemy better than any. No country understands the Russian enemy like Ukraine does.
Yeah.
In the world, that's it. Ultimately, it comes down to equipment, and it's a fallacy, and it's truly garbage analysis. Garbage analysis. If people can't do what Oleksandr, what you just mentioned, which is give us solutions in addition to the criticisms.
Yeah. And what? I didn't see. And I didn't see this because, and that's very important. Okay, give us solutions. You can say just look, let's supply with more weapons Ukrainians, and that will be solutions. I agree. But when we are talking just look, one solution that could be probably if this counteroffensive will be unsuccessful, so maybe we need to go to peace negotiations and so on. That's not the solutions in this point of view, because Russians then will move forward.
Yes.
Then will move with new aggression, with new act of aggression, with new war, and that's only the question of time, the issue of the time, because they continue preparations for a full-scale war, for continuous this full-scale year. They continue mobilization. They are creating new military units in Russia right now, and that's only summer, August. When could you imagine what they will do on autumn period, on September and October?
We lived through it last year. You and I lived through it last year. The Russian terrorism, the Russian war crimes only increase in the winter. It only increases as time goes by. Is it fair to say that Moscow's regime still has the destruction of Ukraine as their #1 goal?
Yes, destruction and destroy Ukraine and kill Ukrainians, that's the main goal. We can see this. And look, everyone in the world, yesterday General Assembly, Council of Security of the United Nations was. And everyone said
useless, by the way, because they have an illegal country, or a country that is sitting illegally on the table.
Yeah. And
you know
they
what? Russia's an illegal country too, because ultimately Russia's not a country. Russia's a terrorist state.
And I told about this. I wrote an article about this, that Russia use terrorist tactics against all world right now. Because this of the grain, they are using terrorist missile attacks on the grain ports of Ukraine. You can see this right now. And
I believe some even fell on Romania.
Yes, in Romania.
Yes.
And what's the NATO reaction?
What's the NATO reaction of spies being caught in Poland? What's the NATO reaction of missiles falling in Romania? What's the NATO reaction of embassies being hit of partner nations, like in Kharkiv last year? In, I believe, April of 2022, an embassy was hit, a consulate, not an embassy, by a Russian missile in Kharkiv. Where is the NATO reaction? ultimately, speaking as an individual and speaking as a soldier, I appreciate everything NATO's doing. But NATO, where are you when it needs to happen?
Yeah. Of course, I just have a question. We don't to be agree. We need to be disagree with Russia will use Black Sea as Russia wants. Because on the Black Sea, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, as NATO members. Georgia, yes, and Ukraine. And I can see that very important instrument that deterrents Russian right now in the Black Sea, that Ukrainian sea drones. that's working, yes. And I think that we will continue.
Was that our drone that hit the Russian ship?
Yes.
That was us.
Yes.
I don't know. I can't. Yes. This is why I'm on your show right now, even though I'm hosting it, because
Ukrainian.
It was Ukrainian. Okay, Ukrainian there you have drones. It. All right.
And Russians need to understand this, that we will continue. Let's just imagine, they have more than 70 ships, 70 Navy ships in the Sevastopol port right now. They are not on
illegally in Sevastopol, because Crimea is Ukraine.
Yes. And they are in the port. They are not on the open sea because they are afraid of Ukrainian sea drones. And
70, you said.
More than 70. 74, it seems to me, something like this.
They should take the boats to the Arctic. That's the only place these ships would be safe, because ultimately, all of Russia, as the president has said, President Zelensky stated, the war is returning to Russia.
Yeah.
And the war is most definitely taking place all across Ukraine, which includes Crimea, which includes Ukrainian territorial waters. And ultimately, they might as well just make these ships scrap metal, because if they have 70 of them, more than 70 in Sevastopol, that's more than 70 different targets.
Yeah.
Look at that
yes,
smile.
That's very important.
Yes.
Yes, it's very important. And I think that probably that could be the main goal for our sea drones, just to distract and destroy Russian ships. It's very important on sea. And we are transformate, we are change the rules of war on the sea. And I think especially when you can see that Russians' positions on the sea in the beginning of this full-scale invasion like this and our like this. Yes, and that's so. But nowadays, what we can see that anti-ship missiles and also sea drones, they are changing these rules on the sea war, and it's very important. We are transforming. I think that's also very important to research this. I will try to do this with my colleagues, because that change the rule of force when you have a lot of when you have a big fleet, you have a lot of ships, and they could be useless because of sea drones. They are cheaper, they are more simple, and they are faster sometimes than ships or boats. So look, in this case near Novorossiysk, Ukrainians use 2 drones, and one of them hit the Russian ship. That's very important. That's a good efficiency.
I can't comment on any of it. This is why I'm on Ukrainian side with you, Oleksandr. So you're suggesting, again, because this has not come from ministry, but it is coming from you, and we have free speech and expert analyst here. Yes,
it's my opinion.
It's your opinion, and you seem to be speaking from a point of fact. Can we get 50% of our sea drones through most of the time?
I think it depends from different situations, because sometimes Russians, they are trying to create some defense lines against our sea drones. They are trying to protect their fleet in the port, in the Sevastopol, use different technologies. They are using their naval ships and so on. They are using their aviation and drones. So they are trying to protect. But what I can see is that, first of all, what this attack on in Novorossiysk showed to us. First, distance. Long distance, that's the first point.
No place in Russia is safe, really, in a sense. That
no place.
We can hunt the Russians down
anywhere
in the world. actually, anywhere in the world, but ultimately, most definitely, within anywhere in the Russian Federation, that's a target.
Yes, second, we can cut and we can go move through the defense line of Russians on the sea. That's very important. And third point, that this drone could bring a lot of distractions for Russian ships. That's also very important. So that's the conclusions of this case, and I think that in the future we will see. And also, the second case we saw, that's Crimea breach. It's a breach on the Kerch Strait. It's very important because we have two cases. A first case that that was a breach. That's a very hard target to destroy, and also the ship. Also not simple target, of course, and different targets, and we have results in the both cases. Of course, I think that that's not enough, because we will see, and I explain this like, our, that we are trying to see how Russians protect, trying to find the lines, how to move forward, how to move through their defense lines, and which kind of using these drones will be the most efficient.
Let me ask you this question. Ultimately, the psychological impact that this has on Russian sailors, or when we shoot down Russian pilots, when we shoot down Russian paratroopers, etc. I'm not even just discussing the convicts that are, in quote, the meat grinder. I'm talking about the skilled, or theoretically skilled, Russian troops. How soon before they mentally break? Do you think we're on the verge of breaking them psychologically?
I think yes. I think that's very important, and what I can see right now in this example, for example, attacks on the military objects, on the Russians' military objects in occupied Crimea. Look, that's very important because we have the line between Russian forces on the occupied southern Ukrainian territories, where Ukrainians continue a counteroffensive operation on the Melitopol and Berdyansk directions. And let's just imagine that they will have a huge logistical problems with ammunition and weapons. And where are they taking these weapons? From the Crimea. So when we will broke these lines, and we are trying to do this, I can show example that's destruction of the Changar bridge, a railroad part of this bridge. That's very important because Russians using railroad, mostly railroad. They are using 70–80%, the main logistic line for their supplies. And we will broke this, where they will get ammunition, where they will get weapons. From eastern part, yes, probably, but that will be 20–30% from that they will get from Crimea, and that will be, and that will have influence on their moral conditions, I think.
Psychologically,
that will demoralize
morally, they're becoming demoralized. Ultimately, there's a saying that, what's the exact saying? Logistics is 90% of a war, or 99% of a war is logistics. And ultimately, we know, and this is one of the reasons that our command has been so successful in executing this war, and why we are able to claim so many successes, because we have hit so many of their logistics points. We've started to knot it up, as we would say in English. And ultimately, if we continue this way, you believe it will have a devastating moral effect and psychological effect on the Russians. Let's move over to something that's very close to my heart, which is anti-corruption efforts. Today, I went to the Ministry for Restoration and USAID came together, along with the European Union's delegation to Ukraine, came together for what's called Winning Ukraine's Future, a transparent and accountable recovery. Some would say, what does that have to do with the military? But ultimately, we don't just have to win this war for liberty right now in liberation, return to the 1991 borders, but we have to understand what it means for democracy in the future. Over the past several weeks, ever since really the NATO conference in Vilnius, there's been reports of multiple military commissars being arrested, 5 thus far, by the SBU and National Police. We are rooting out corruption in the armed forces of Ukraine. Why do you believe that there is such corrupt behavior in our military record centers?
That's very important, because from the 2 points of view. First, we need to fight against corruption here in Ukraine, just for us, for Ukrainians, and just for our future, just for our better destiny, and of course, especially when it's when we are talking about some corruption in the I don't know, in the forces, in the military, in the Ministry of Defense, of course. And for me personally, it's very important that we can see that our President Zelensky, you know, he told that we need to change the situation, we need to fix, we need to fight against corruption. And no one will have immunity because of this. And we can see examples of this fighting against corruption right now. Of course, personally, we can be disappointed, personally for me, for Ukrainians, yes, because we know about this situation in the military, yes.
Is it really, let me ask you this, and I'm saying this seriously, is it disappointing or is it empowering knowing that people are finally facing justice?
First of all, that's disappointing because you know that we have still these cases and situations. And the second, of course, that's empower and that's inspire, because I can see that we are not, you know, that we are speaking about this, and we are speaking here clearly, yes, openly about this situation.
Absolutely openly.
We do not hide this.
No.
We do not hide. We are talking openly and transparency. Just look, yes, we have a problem. We will fight with this problem. We will fix this problem, and we will try to do all the best that depends from us, just to be more transparency and to empower rule of law here in our country. That's our interest. That's also, you know, sometimes I can hear that we have 2 front lines, against Russian aggression, and the second against corruption. Probably that's correct, and we are trying to provide all the best tactics against this corruption and to fight with this, and these examples show to us, and that's very important. And I think that our Western partners, they also can see this, they also understand this, and they also see that yes, we have this problem, we are speaking about this problem, we are do not hiding this problem, and we will fight with this problem. We will fix this problem. And we do not have this in the future, I expect. Of course, we can speak about that we will not have any corruption, because it depends from the level of corruption.
I think there's a difference between crime, which is always going to exist, and that's why national police is there, and within this crime you're going to have things that are financially very wrong, and corruption, which is more from an official or organizational standpoint, where people are making money and profiting off of official business. Here's a question for you regarding corruption, and I asked this question on Twitter to the Twitterverse today, or Jeetverse, or whatever it's called now. We had a traitor, and I'm calling him a traitor because he was convicted as a traitor, but he was a National Guardsman that was paid off by FSB to give information, an active duty service member of the Ukrainian National Guard. He received 12 years in prison. My question was 12 years enough? And if not, how long should he have received for being a literal traitor? What's your view on that? What type of prison sentence is enough to stop this behavior?
You know, that depends from our crime code, penal code, because what we have right now, that's, it seems to me, from 10 to 15 years.
Is what's normally been, right?
Yes, that's normally, yes. That's normally for the crimes like this. Yes, so I think, yes, for us it's very important, you know, to, that's I think that's okay. He has 12 years because what's important right now, just to clear and just to provide counterintelligence in the army, in National Guard, in the special services, and so on, and just to trying to fight with this. We just need to fight with this because Russians, of course, they are trying to use different methods. We understand, yes, we are trying to fighting with these spies and espionage. That's the most important right now. And of course, 12 years are just according to our laws that we have right now.
It's interesting because you're bringing up 12 years and the death penalty is not legal in Ukraine,
Yeah.
even for traitors. Life imprisonment would be something that you would almost do in Russia, right? You're destroying someone. It shows the humanity of the Ukrainian people, that even during wartime, even during special law period, or otherwise known as martial law, we are living in a world where the Ukrainian people are saying everyone can be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
That shows, to me, one of the reasons we're beating the Russians in every capacity, because Ukraine is holding on to its humanity and not taking on these draconian and very authoritarian ways to carry out punishment.
Yeah, and we are trying, that we have democracy standards, and we're trying, of course, we have some problems, but we didn't lose this. That's very important. Democracy, freedom of speech, because I'm speaking to you here, I'm speaking free right now, and that's very important for me. Here in my country, that's very important.
I'm smiling.
Yeah.
Here it comes.
And so
I want to explain to the audience before we get to the point. I'm going to give it to you right now because we're both laughing, and I know I just spoke over him, but we discussed this prior. I am on this show with Oleksandr Musienko. We're sitting at the Territorial Defense Forces Media Studios, and Oleksandr says to me, I want to give an update on some of the frontline situations. And he told me something that I didn't want to hear and I don't believe, and ultimately is not sanctioned by the Ministry of Defense, is not sanctioned by the Armed Forces of Ukraine. So I am going to preface this by stating I don't personally believe the information that Oleksandr is about to tell the world. That said, we discussed free speech. We discussed the fact that Oleksandr is a Ukrainian, a civilian, a renowned expert for sure, whose sources in the past have been strong. Knowing this, Oleksandr, what update do you want to give us from the front lines that proves that we have free speech in Ukraine?
Yeah, I can tell first of all what I can see, and I will tell about frontline. Just what I can say is that, look, we told about humanity, about rules and so on. But unfortunately, our enemy, without rules, without any rules, without any terms, so that's very important to understand. When I can see that United Nations just told that what you are doing in Moscow city and so on, that's crazy, because where they been when Kakhovka Dam were destructed and so on.
Where
so,
are you, United Nations?
Yes.
UN Security Council.
How we can, and also, okay, we will be in this kind of situation, in this rules that Russians can use all the weapons against us on our territory. But we cannot use on Russian territory anything. Of course, I'm not speaking about Western weapons. Okay, we have obligations to do not use them. Okay.
But these are what we agreed to with our partners, not where you have a supposed neutral organization trying to decide.
Yeah, and if, for example, if we will have some our weapons, we can use it on the against Russian military objects. That's the fair play. That will be fair, because when you are on the unfair conditions, how you can be successful?
You have a legal background. I think it's safe to say that it's not only fair from an ethical standpoint, but it's also fair under international law to strike back while at war.
Yeah. That's very important. And second, so that's unfair. We can, according to the international law, fighting against Russians on their territory and provide some operations. And then we'll have success, the common success for us and our Western partners. The second, about frontline, what I can see is that Russians try to provide offensive operations on the eastern part of Ukraine. Yes, they're trying to move near Bakhmut on the Kupiansk and Liman direction just to stop our counteroffensive on the southern part. We continue to defend this line on the eastern part. Russians move some forces even from Russia, some reserves, and that's important, but they do not have, and I expect they will not have any success there.
No success, do you hear this?
Our defense lines, no, because
Western analysts?
Yes, and also
No, you're
we
wrong.
can see that I just speaking also for Western our foreign analysts, that just because they need to understand that Russians have some resources, and just underestimate them, just to say like this, look. So when we are talking, we just can beat them for 1 month or 2 months. No, that will be incorrect. And of course, we need to understand we do not underestimate them, and they continue to move some forces to the Staromlinivka directions and so on, just to defend their lines, because they're afraid that we will move forward from the Staromayorsky, that we were liberated, and then we will move forward to Staromlinivka. They're trying to protect. So the war continues. Ukrainian counteroffensive continues. We didn't stop any offensive operations. We need just to understand that our counteroffensive looks like this.
Do you know when the counteroffensive will stop? Do you know when offensive actions will stop? Because I have the answer to that. Do you want to guess what my answer is? Because I know. I know, and I'm going to give you the official statement that I know when our offensive actions are going to end. But first, I want you to...
When the Ukrainian national flag will be in Sevastopol.
Basically, yes, a return to the 1991 borders.
Yes.
This man knows as well. We know when it will end. Until that happens, until we've liberated all of Ukraine, including Crimea, including what was formerly the independent city of Sevastopol.
Yeah.
Ultimately, there will be no stopping, but it will take place with the time frame and the decision making. We can get suggestions from our partner nations, but ultimately the Ukrainian people will decide when the counteroffensive ends. And currently, 77% in the last poll of Ukrainians said we must move forward to a complete return to the 1991 borders. And ultimately, we also want President Zelensky's 10-point peace formula. That's the only peace plan that's okay right now, because it doesn't just handle a stoppage of the war, because the war is going to end when all the Russians and their mercenaries are swept away, are pushed out of Ukraine, but also the implementation of the peace formula from President Zelensky, because that will also guarantee that Russia is no longer a threat to Ukraine.
Yeah.
I just received, we're a live show, even though this is your podcast. I just received notice that because in 30 minutes, we have to go live with Ukraine in the Know. I'm going to have to wrap up Oleksandr Musienko's Ukraine Inside. Oleksandr, thank you. We'll do this again next week.
Yeah, okay.
I think he should have an office at Territorial Defense Forces Media Studios, but that's not up to me. Ultimately, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Oleksandr Musienko, for your insight. This is Sergeant Sarah Ashton Cirillo coming to you from Territorial Defense Forces Media Studios. This was Ukraine Inside. Make sure to follow Oleksandr Musienko on Twitter and YouTube for all of his insight.